Welcome to another deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of intelligence, consciousness, and that incredible thinking machine, the human brain.
It's going to be a good one.
You requested a super detailed breakdown from this whole section of a neuroscience book, so get ready because we are going to cover a ton.
Yeah, we're going deep on this one.
Everything from defining intelligence to even practical stuff like brain dysfunction.
That's right, the whole 9 yards.
So to get started, let's just tackle this idea of intelligence itself. You know, intelligence for the longest time was all about logic, reasoning.
Right.
Basically how well you could solve a puzzle or ace a standardized test.
Mm-hmm.
But recent research suggests that might not be the whole picture.
Yeah, it's definitely more nuanced than that.
So spill the beans. What's the latest scoop?
Well, emotions.
Emotions.
Yeah, they actually play a way bigger role than we thought.
Really?
It's not just cold, hard logic. Our feelings, they really influence how we think and make decisions, big time.
Wow. So you're saying that our emotional responses are actually contributing to intelligent behavior.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Emotions, they aren't just distractions or noise that interfere with rational thought.
Okay.
They're giving us valuable info.
Interesting.
They guide our attention, help us figure out those super complex social situations.
Right.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Would it even be possible to make those split-second decisions without actually processing and reacting to our emotions?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's almost like our emotions are giving us this gut feeling
That's a great way to put it.
about a situation,
Yeah,
which we then use for our logical reasoning.
exactly. And when we talk about intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
got to remember, it's not like one size fits all, right?
Right.
That's where this idea of multiple intelligences comes in.
I've heard of that. It basically says there isn't just one type of smart, right?
Exactly.
Right.
You got those who excel in linguistic intelligence, while others are amazing at spatial reasoning or music.
Mm-hmm.
This really challenges that traditional view that intelligence is just one single measurable thing.
It's funny because this makes me think of those savants, right?
Oh, yeah.
People who might have limitations in certain areas, but then, wow, incredible talents in really specific domains like music, art, even calculation.
Oh, definitely. Savants are like a walking example of the diverse potential of the human brain.
Right.
Their abilities show us that intelligence, even in a single person, can be expressed in extraordinary and sometimes totally unexpected ways.
Yeah, it's almost like different parts of their brains are specialized for these really specific tasks.
Exactly. And that actually leads us perfectly into our next topic.
Okay.
To really understand these different expressions of intelligence, we got to, dive into the brain itself. How does it process all this information?
Yeah.
How is it structured?
Right.
And how do different areas specialize in these unique functions?
So let's trace that path of information through the brain. How do our senses actually pick up something and then turn that input into, conscious awareness?
All right, so picture this.
Okay.
You're strolling through the park,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this beautiful butterfly just fluttering among the flowers.
I love butterflies.
Light from the butterfly enters your eyes, activating these photoreceptor cells in your retina.
Okay.
Then this visual info travels through this complex network of neurons,
Wow.
eventually reaching, finally, the visual cortex at the back of your brain.
So are you saying that specific parts of the brain are dedicated to processing certain types of sensory information?
Exactly.
Right.
And damage to a specific area can lead to very particular deficits.
Okay.
For instance, damage to a part of the temporal lobe, it's called the auditory cortex.
Mm.
This can cause something called acquired amusia.
Acquired amusia. So break that down for me. What exactly does that mean?
Imagine this.
Okay.
You wake up one day and you suddenly realize you can't process music anymore.
What?
Yeah, you hear the sounds,
Yeah.
but the melodies, the rhythms, they just don't hold any meaning.
Wow.
That's acquired amusia. It's a powerful example of how specialized functions are localized in the brain.
So it's a very specific part of the brain is responsible for that very specific function.
Precisely.
Wow. That's both fascinating and kind of scary at the same time.
It is.
It really shows how complex the brain is, its organization,
Absolutely.
and how much we depend on it working properly.
To help make sense of this organization, neuroscientists, they've developed these models to kind of conceptualize brain function.
Okay.
One model is the triune brain,
Okay.
proposed by Paul MacLean.
Mm-hmm.
It's been, kind of updated by newer models, but it's still pretty helpful to think about the evolution and organization of the brain.
Okay, so how does this triune brain model actually work?
Okay, so imagine the brain having like 3 interconnected layers. Each one represents a different stage of evolutionary development.
Got it.
The oldest layer, we call it the reptilian brain.
The reptilian brain.
Yeah,
Right.
it has the brainstem, the cerebellum,
Okay.
responsible for those primal essential functions.
Like what?
You know, breathing, heart rate, our basic instincts,
Okay.
the things that keep us, alive.
So it's like our brain's like operating system,
Exactly.
kind of handling those essential background processes.
Yeah, like keeping the lights on.
Right, right.
So then we have the next layer.
Okay, what's that?
It's the limbic system.
Okay.
This includes structures like the amygdala, hippocampus,
Right.
and the hypothalamus.
Okay.
This layer is all about emotions, memory, and social behavior.
So it's taking those basic survival instincts and then adding like layers of emotional and social complexity.
Right. It's like building upon that foundation.
Okay. So then what's the most recent addition to this like brain cake, so to speak?
Okay, well, the outermost layer is the neocortex.
Okay.
The newest part, evolutionarily speaking, of the brain.
Okay.
Responsible for those higher order functions that really set humans apart.
Like what?
Things like language, abstract thought, planning, and of course, consciousness.
Okay.
These are the abilities that let us reflect on ourselves and the world around us.
Right.
It's what makes us, well, us.
Makes us us.
And speaking of what makes us us, we can't ignore the big question, right?
Right.
Consciousness.
Consciousness.
How does this subjective experience, this feeling of awareness, come from this intricate network of neurons?
I mean, it's a question that's baffled, scientists and philosophers for like centuries.
Right.
What insights can neuroscience even offer into, this profound mystery?
Well, while we don't have all the answers,
Right.
we are uncovering some of the neural correlates of consciousness.
Okay.
Take, for instance, metacognition.
Metacognition. Okay.
This is our ability to actually think about our own thinking. That's kind of strange when you really think about it.
Yeah.
We have this inner observer constantly analyzing, interpreting our own thoughts, our experiences.
It's true. It's true.
Now, this is a hallmark of human consciousness,
Okay.
allowing us to not only experience the world, but to reflect on it, learn from it, and even change how we behave.
Right.
This level of self-awareness, it seems to be a key difference between us and other animals.
Okay, so we've got this incredible neocortex. It's like the thinking cap of our brain, responsible for consciousness, all the higher level functions. But how's it actually structured?
Well, the neocortex is seriously complex.
Huh?
6 distinct layers of these densely packed neurons.
Wait, hold on. 6 layers. That's a lot.
It is, and it's further divided into 4 lergs: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal,
Okay.
each specialized for different tasks.
But if we zoom in even further.
Okay, even further.
Yeah.
We find the neocortex is built from repeating units called mini-columns.
Mini-columns. What are those?
They contain about 100 neurons, organized in a specific way.
Interesting.
Almost like the brain's Lego bricks.
So these mini-columns, they're like the fundamental building blocks of the neocortex.
Yeah, think of it like that.
How many are there?
Billions. And with that many neurons,
Yeah.
the brain faces a wiring challenge, right?
Right.
It can't have every neuron directly connected to every other neuron.
That would be a nightmare.
It would be impossible. So the brain utilizes this concept of a small world network.
The small world network.
Neurons are primarily connected to their neighbors, forming clusters, like small towns.
Okay.
But there are also these long-range connections that act like highways,
Oh, right.
linking these clusters and allowing information to travel efficiently across the entire brain.
So like local specialization and global communication all within the brain.
Precisely.
So then how do these connections actually form?
This is where we come to one of the most fundamental principles of the brain, Hebb's law.
Okay.
It states that neurons that fire together wire together.
Interesting. What does that mean?
The more 2 neurons are activated simultaneously, the stronger their connection becomes.
This is like a path in the woods. The more you walk it, the clearer and more defined it becomes.
Exactly. This is how the brain learns and adapts.
Fascinating.
Connections that are used a lot get stronger, while those that are ignored, they weaken.
Right.
And can even disappear.
Wow.
This process, it's crucial during development as the brain is, forming its initial wiring. But it doesn't stop. It continues throughout our lives.
So our brains are always changing.
Constantly adapting to new experiences.
Incredible. So it's like our experiences actually physically change the structure of our brain.
Exactly.
And this dynamic interplay,
Mm-hmm.
it's behind everything from learning new skills to forming memories.
Right.
Speaking of memories,
Yeah.
this is something I find so fascinating.
Me too.
How does the brain actually store information and experiences?
Well, first, got to distinguish between types of memory, right? Short-term memory,
Okay.
also known as working memory.
Okay.
This lets us hold information for just a little bit.
Like a mental sticky note.
Yeah, like a mental scratch pad where we can temporarily store and play with information.
Okay.
So you're trying to remember a phone number long enough to dial it, or following instructions to put together, some furniture,
Right.
that kind of thing.
But doesn't working memory have its limits?
It does. Most people can only hold about 7 things in mind at once.
7 things. Why is that?
Well, it's thought to be related to how the brain organizes information in working memory. Research suggests we hold information in these chunks, and we can only manage a certain number of chunks at a time.
So it's like our mental scratch pad only has a
Yeah.
certain number of slots.
Exactly.
So what happens if we try to remember more than we can handle?
Things fall apart.
Okay.
We forget items,
Right.
get them mixed up, or just have trouble focusing.
Like when I try to juggle too many things at once and then I completely blank on something important.
It very well could be.
Okay.
And these working memory limits, they have real-world implications.
Yeah, in what way?
Well, they highlight the importance of breaking down complex tasks into smaller steps
Yeah.
and using, external aids like writing things down
Yeah,
to ease the load on our working memory.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Work smarter, not harder, and recognize those limits. But what about those long-lasting memories?
Ah, yeah.
The ones that shape us, color our experiences. How are those formed?
That relies on a different system.
Okay.
Long-term memory.
Okay.
This is where information is stored for long periods, maybe even a lifetime. And a key part of this is the hippocampus.
The hippocampus, okay?
Yeah.
That seahorse-shaped structure deep in the brain.
That's the one. It's like a memory indexer. It
Right.
links all the different parts of an experience together.
Right.
Sights, sounds, emotions, the context, and creates a complete memory that can be stored in different areas of the brain.
So like taking those snapshots, sound bites, even feelings,
Mm-hmm.
and weaving them together into a whole story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Over time,
Yeah.
with, repeated activation and recall, these memories get consolidated and stored across different areas of the neocortex.
So they become more stable,
Yeah,
harder to forget.
exactly. That's why you can recall a childhood memory so vividly
Mm-hmm.
or effortlessly ride a bike even after years.
So it's like those memories are etched into the very structure of our brains.
Literally.
But then why do we forget things?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if our brains are so good at storing information.
It's important to remember memory isn't perfect, right?
Right.
Forgetting is natural. It's how our brains work.
Okay.
Sometimes it's because we haven't accessed a memory in a while,
Makes sense.
and those connections just they weaken.
Okay.
Other times it could be because of interference from other memories
Right.
or even emotional factors.
So forgetting is not always a bad thing.
Not at all.
Okay.
It can actually be helpful.
In what way?
Well, it lets us declutter our minds,
Mm-hmm.
get rid of irrelevant info,
Right.
and focus on what matters.
That's like deleting files off of our mental hard drive.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about in cases where forgetting is more serious, like amnesia?
Right. Amnesia, that's severe memory loss.
Okay.
It can come from brain injury, stroke, or certain diseases.
Right.
It shows up in different ways.
How so?
Well, retrograde amnesia is the loss of memories from the past,
Okay.
while anterograde amnesia is the inability to form new memories.
Anterograde amnesia. That sounds really tough.
It is.
Imagine waking up each day with no memory of the one before.
Right. It's a profound condition.
Yeah.
It really shows how important memory is to who we are and how we experience the world. A classic case is patient HM.
Patient HM.
Parts of his hippocampus were removed
Mm-hmm.
to treat severe epilepsy.
Okay. So what happened to him after the surgery?
He couldn't form new long-term memories.
Wow.
He could hold info for a few minutes, but it would just vanish.
Oh, wow.
It was like he was stuck in a constant present,
That's tragic.
unable to create lasting memories.
It really emphasizes the importance of that hippocampus.
It does. And that brings us to another crucial part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
Often called the executive brain, right?
That's right, the CEO of the brain.
Okay.
Responsible for planning, decision-making, goal-directed behavior.
So like The prefrontal cortex is the one calling the shots,
Yeah,
taking in info from all the other parts and figuring out how to reach our goals.
you got it. And a key element of this is remember, working memory.
Okay, yeah.
Those 7 plus or minus 2 items,
Right, right.
the prefrontal cortex manages and manipulates that info.
So it's like a conductor of an orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
coordinating the different instruments,
Mm.
our thoughts,
Yeah,
memories,
right.
emotions, to create, like, this harmonious behavior.
I love that analogy.
Okay.
But it's not all cold logic up there.
Oh, okay.
The orbitofrontal cortex, a part of the prefrontal cortex, is involved in emotional decision-making.
So you're saying those gut feelings, they actually play a role in our decisions.
Absolutely. Our gut feelings, they're often based on past experiences and things we've learned.
Okay.
The orbitofrontal cortex helps us integrate those feelings into the decision process,
Okay.
guiding us toward choices that feel right, even if we can't totally explain why.
So it's not about ignoring our emotions. It's understanding how they contribute to, good decision making.
You've got.
Now, when it comes to good decisions, the brain also has this amazing system for monitoring our progress and correcting errors.
You're talking about the anterior cingulate cortex?
The ACC, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard it described as the brain's error detection system. So what exactly does that mean?
Okay, so think of the ACC as like your internal alarm. Always scanning, looking for mismatches between what we expect and what's actually happening, signaling when we need to, adjust our approach or try something different.
So it's like having a helpful inner critic.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
The ACC is key for learning from our mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So we improve over time.
Okay.
It helps us avoid repeating the same errors and refine our strategies,
Right.
making us more efficient.
So like a coach in our heads, helping us learn and grow.
Exactly. And what's really cool,
Yeah.
we're not always aware of the ACC working.
What?
It often operates behind the scenes,
Interesting.
fine-tuning our behavior without us even knowing it.
It's like our brains are on autopilot, making adjustments without us having to consciously direct it. That's a great way to put it. That is incredible.
Yeah.
So what else is our brain doing without us knowing?
Well, that brings us to automatized actions.
Automatized actions. What are those?
Think about riding a bike, typing on a keyboard. Once you've learned them, you can do them without really thinking, right?
It's true. I don't have to look for each key on the keyboard anymore.
Right.
It's automatic.
Yeah. Through practice repetition, the brain basically automates these actions,
Okay.
offloads them to the unconscious.
Hmm.
So our conscious minds can, focus on other stuff.
So it's like a team of skilled assistants working behind the scenes,
Exactly.
handling those routine tasks so our conscious minds are free for the bigger challenges.
I love that analogy.
Okay.
And this automation, it's not just for physical stuff. It applies to cognitive processes, too.
Like what?
Like reading.
Oh, okay.
When you're reading a book, you're not consciously decoding every single letter in a word anymore.
Well, I'm just kind of absorbing it.
Exactly. Years of practice, and boom, reading becomes automatic, allowing you to just flow through the text.
Wow. It's amazing how much our brains are doing without us even realizing it.
Right.
It makes you wonder what else is happening under the surface.
There's a lot going on down there. A great example is something called the cocktail party effect.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Isn't that where you can focus on one conversation, even in a noisy environment?
That's it.
Okay, yeah.
Like at a party, you can tune into one conversation and filter out all the others.
Right.
It's thought to be this complex interplay of attention and unconscious processing.
Okay.
Even though we might not be consciously aware of those other conversations, our brains are still listening, scanning for anything important or interesting to us.
So if someone says our name or something we're interested in,
Yeah.
we might suddenly hear it, even though we were ignoring it before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our brains are constantly searching for anything personally relevant, even when our conscious minds are busy with something else.
That's pretty impressive. So even when we think we're not paying attention, our brains are still hard at work, processing information, making sense of everything.
Always working. And this leads to a condition that really shows this blind sight.
Blind sight. What's that?
Well, it happens when people with damage to their visual cortex, that's the part that handles seeing,
Okay.
they can still respond to visual stimuli, even though they say they can't see.
So they're basically blind, but they can react to things they can't see.
Yeah. It suggests that there are multiple ways to process visual information.
Okay.
And some of these, they bypass those conscious visual centers.
So even though they're not consciously seeing something, their brains are still picking up on the cues and guiding their actions.
Precisely.
Wow. That's mind-boggling.
It challenges what we think we know about consciousness and perception, right?
Right.
Suggesting that there's a lot more going on beneath the surface than we realize.
That's incredible. It really makes you appreciate just how complex the human brain is.
It really does.
And how adaptable it is.
It underscores this idea that consciousness is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to brain activity.
Yeah.
There's this vast world of unconscious processing going on, shaping our thoughts, feelings, and actions in ways we're only beginning to understand.
This is all so fascinating.
Right?
I'm really ready to dive even deeper into the mysteries of the brain.
Let's do it.
So where do we go from here?
Well, next, we can explore how the brain learns and keeps information, really diving into learning and memory.
I'm all ears.
Learning and memory, they're really the foundation of who we are. It's how we, pick up knowledge, build skills, and form our own unique view of the world.
Yeah, it's like our brains are just constantly collecting and organizing experiences.
Yeah.
Building this massive library of information that we can tap into.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And this whole process of learning and memory, it's incredibly dynamic.
Okay.
Involves this intricate dance between different brain regions, different mechanisms.
So it's not like our memories are just filed away in these neat little folders.
Yeah, no, not quite. It's way more intricate than that.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about working memory earlier?
Right.
It's kind of like the brain's short-term holding area.
Yeah, like that mental scratch pad.
Exactly.
With limited slots.
Right.
But how does that information go from short-term to, like, long-term storage?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
That process is called memory consolidation.
Okay.
And it's this amazing interplay between a bunch of brain regions, like the hippocampus, the neocortex, and even the amygdala.
Okay, so break it down for me. The hippocampus, that's like the memory indexer, right?
Exactly. Links together different aspects of an experience, the sights, sounds, emotions, context, creates a cohesive memory that can be stored for the long haul.
So like the brain's librarian.
Yeah, like a librarian.
Carefully cataloging and organizing our experiences.
Exactly.
What about the neocortex and the amygdala?
Okay, so the neocortex, that's like the giant storage warehouse. That's where memories are ultimately kept. And the amygdala.
Yeah.
It adds that emotional layer to memories, especially for experiences that were, really intense.
So if I have a super vivid memory, like, let's say the time I went skydiving.
Okay.
It's not just the visual of the ground rushing up to meet me, but also that feeling of, like, exhilaration, maybe a little bit of fear.
Exactly. The amygdala helps lock in those emotional nuances, making the memory stronger, easier to recall.
Okay.
But it's important to remember, memory, it's not a perfect recording.
Okay.
It's more like a reconstruction, right? And those reconstructions can be influenced by our emotions, our beliefs, even by experiences we have later on.
So you're saying our memories can actually change over time?
They can be altered.
That's kind of unsettling.
Yeah, it is. Our memories aren't always as reliable as we think. And this is super important when you think about things like eyewitness testimony, which can be notoriously unreliable.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If our memories can be changed by, our emotions, our beliefs, then it stands to reason that leading questions or even just suggestive information could influence them too.
Exactly. Our memories are malleable, and it's important to be aware of the things that can affect them.
Right.
But let's shift gears for a sec.
Okay.
Let's talk about another cool thing. Different types of long-term memory.
Okay.
We've touched on episodic memory, which is our memory for personal events.
Yeah, those memories that let us mentally time travel.
Yes.
Reliving past experiences, connecting them to who we are now.
Exactly.
But aren't there other types of long-term memory?
There are.
Okay, like what?
Another one is semantic memory.
Okay.
This is our memory for facts, general knowledge.
So things like knowing the capital of France or like understanding what gravity is?
Exactly. Semantic memory is like our mental encyclopedia.
Okay.
It holds all that accumulated knowledge we have about the world. And Unlike episodic memory, which is tied to specific events and experiences,
Right.
semantic memory is more abstract, more general.
So it's like a vast database of
Yeah.
information that we use to make sense of the world.
Precisely. And then we have procedural memory.
Okay.
This is our memory for skills and habits.
Things like riding a bike, playing the piano, tying my shoelaces.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
These are things we learn through practice, repetition.
Right.
Once they're in our procedural memory, we can do them almost effortlessly without even thinking.
That's why it's so hard to explain to someone how to ride a bike.
Right.
It's just something you have to do,
Yeah.
to feel.
Exactly.
More about muscle memory than conscious instruction.
I like that. It's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Procedural memory helps us automate so many actions.
Mm-hmm.
Frees up our conscious mind for other things.
Okay, this is all fascinating.
Yeah.
But is there anything we can do to, like, improve our memory?
Definitely. There are tons of strategies.
Oh, really?
And many of them are based on, the neuroscience principles we've been talking about.
Uh-huh.
Like one technique is spaced repetition.
Okay, spaced repetition. I've heard of that. What is it?
It's about reviewing info at longer and longer intervals.
Okay.
Instead of cramming everything all at once.
Right.
This uses the brain's natural forgetting curve.
Okay.
Helps make memories stronger, less likely to fade.
So instead of trying to memorize, like, a whole textbook chapter the night before a test, it's better to study it in smaller chunks over time.
Exactly. Spaced out study sessions give your brain time to process that info, make those neural connections stronger.
Gotcha.
Another good one is elaboration.
Okay.
You connect new info to stuff you already know,
Mm-hmm.
creates those more meaningful, more memorable associations.
Okay.
So, like, if you're learning a new word, maybe you make up a story or a picture in your mind that includes that word.
Okay. Yeah.
You're linking it to something familiar.
So it's not just about memorizing by rote. It's about actively making the information relevant and engaging.
Exactly. The more you engage, the more you connect it to what you already know,
Okay.
the better you'll remember it.
That makes sense. It's building a bigger web of associations in your brain.
Yes. What other strategies can we use?
I don't know. What else?
Active recall is super powerful.
Active recall.
Okay. It's trying to remember stuff without looking at the answers.
Okay.
It's like a workout for your brain.
Okay.
You're actively searching for the info, not
Okay.
just passively reading it.
So instead of just, like, rereading my notes over and over,
Right.
I should try to recall the information from memory.
Exactly. Use flashcards.
Okay.
Summarize stuff in your own words.
Yeah.
Even teach it to someone else.
Hmm.
When you retrieve that info, it strengthens those connections,
Okay.
makes it more likely you'll remember it later.
That's a great tip. I'll
Mm.
try that. What about sleep?
Oh, sleep is crucial.
Okay.
It's vital for memory consolidation. When we sleep, our brains are busy processing and organizing info from the day,
Okay.
moving it from that short-term to long-term storage.
So pulling an all-nighter to cram for a test,
Yeah,
that might actually backfire.
it could. Sleep deprivation messes with memory,
Okay, wow.
makes it harder to learn and remember.
Okay, I'm definitely going to prioritize sleep from now on. It's crazy to think that while we're sleeping, our brains are working in the background,
They are.
making those connections stronger.
And that brings us to another amazing thing the brain can do.
Okay, what's that?
Change and adapt throughout life. We call it this neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. What is it exactly?
It refers to the brain's ability to basically rewire itself,
Rewire itself.
form new connections, even grow new neurons.
Wow.
All based on experiences and what we learn.
So our brains are constantly evolving and changing.
Constantly adapting.
Incredible. It's like our brains are being sculpted by our experiences.
That's a great way to think about it. Okay. And this plasticity is driven by a few things.
Right.
Changes in how strong those connections are between neurons,
Yeah.
the growth of new neurons,
Mm.
and the reorganization of those neural circuits.
So it's not just adding information, it's actually changing the physical structure of the brain.
That's right.
Wow.
And this neural plasticity, it's most noticeable during childhood and adolescence,
Okay.
when the brain is developing rapidly,
Right.
but it continues throughout life.
So it's never too late to learn new things, to challenge our brains?
Never too late. Keeping our brains active and engaged, that's one of the best things we can do for cognitive health as we age.
Okay, that's good to know. So how can we keep our brains challenged?
Learning new skills, engaging in mentally stimulating activities,
Okay.
staying social, even regular exercise, all of these contribute to a healthy brain.
So it's not just about crosswords and Sudoku.
No, it's about an active, engaged life overall.
Okay,
The more we challenge our brains, the more we promote that plasticity.
gotcha. Are there any, like, really dramatic examples of this neuroplasticity in action?
Oh, yeah, definitely. One is phantom limb syndrome.
Phantom limb. What's that?
It's where people who have lost a limb still experience sensations from it,
Right.
often pain.
So they feel like their missing limb is still there.
Exactly. It's a bizarre thing, often really distressing,
Right.
but it shows us a lot about plasticity.
Okay, in what way?
Basically, when you lose a limb, the brain areas that used to get information from that limb, they're not getting input anymore.
So what happens to them? Do they just shut down?
Not quite. They can rewire,
Okay.
take on new roles, or get input from nearby areas.
Mm.
And sometimes this leads to those phantom sensations.
It's like the brain is trying to make sense of the missing input and creating those phantom feelings to fill the gap.
I like how you put that.
Okay.
It highlights the incredible ability of the brain to adapt
Yeah.
even to these big changes. It shows us that the brain is dynamic, always changing.
This is incredible. Are there other examples of neuroplasticity we can see?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Recovery from brain injury is a big one.
Okay, so even after a stroke or a traumatic brain injury, the brain can still, like, heal and adapt?
To a point, yes. The brain can compensate for damaged areas, especially in young kids.
Okay.
Their brains are still developing, super plastic. This recovery is driven by plasticity.
Okay.
The brain rewires itself,
Well,
bypasses those damaged parts,
interesting.
reroutes information through different pathways.
So even if a specific brain region is damaged,
Yeah,
other parts can step in and take over.
that's right.
That's incredible.
And while full recovery isn't always possible,
Right.
the brain can often make huge improvements over time.
That's really encouraging.
Yeah.
What about rehabilitation?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what role does that play in this whole process?
Rehab therapies like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, they're crucial.
Okay.
They promote that plasticity.
Help maximize recovery.
So it's not just letting the brain heal by itself.
Yep.
It's about actively stimulating it,
It's
giving it the right input to guide that rewiring process.
You got it. Engaging in targeted exercises.
Okay.
Specific activities. These can stimulate those dormant brain areas,
Right.
strengthen existing connections, and even create new ones.
So it's like giving the brain a roadmap for recovery.
That's a great way to think about it.
Okay.
Rehab provides that framework for the brain to rebuild, allowing individuals to regain what they lost, adapt to their new reality.
That's really hopeful.
It is.
Shows how resilient the human brain can be.
It does. And it underscores how important it is to seek help,
Right.
promptly and appropriate treatment
Yeah.
after a brain injury,
Okay.
to maximize those chances of a good recovery.
Makes sense. But let's talk about something else that's essential for understanding human behavior.
Okay, like what?
Motivation.
Motivation. I think it's something we all get on an intuitive level,
Right.
but I'm sure there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Definitely. Motivation is what drives us, the reason we do what we do. It's what gets us going, what pushes us to achieve those goals, and really shapes how we interact with the world.
So what's happening in the brain when we're feeling motivated?
Well, motivation involves this complex interplay of different brain regions and these neurotransmitter systems.
Okay.
One key player is the nucleus accumbens,
Okay.
often called the brain's pleasure center.
The pleasure center. Tell me more.
All right, so the nucleus accumbens,
Yeah.
it's a central part of the brain's reward system.
Okay.
Gets activated by rewarding stimuli,
Like
things like food, sex, social interaction, and it releases dopamine.
dopamine. I've heard of that.
Right, the neurotransmitter connected to feeling good and satisfied.
So when we do something pleasurable, like having a really good meal, spending time with people we care about, our nucleus accumbens is active and we get a rush of dopamine.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
And that feeling of pleasure,
Yeah.
it reinforces those behaviors, making us more likely to do them again.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
We do something pleasurable,
Yes.
our brain rewards us,
Mm-hmm.
we feel good,
Right.
and we want to keep doing it.
Exactly. This reward system is essential for learning, motivation, even addiction.
Addiction, wait. How does the reward system play into that?
Okay, so drugs of abuse can hijack the system.
Okay.
They flood the nucleus accumbens with dopamine,
Oh, wow.
creating this artificial but really intense feeling of pleasure.
So they trick the brain into thinking the drug is, like, necessary for survival.
That's a good way to put it. And over time, the brain gets used to the drug.
Okay.
Needs more and more to get the same feeling, which leads to tolerance and dependence.
That's a little scary.
Yeah, it is. It shows how powerful that reward system is.
Yeah.
And how easily it can be manipulated.
Mm.
But hey, let's not focus on the negative. The reward system is also what drives us to achieve our goals, build those relationships, experience joy.
That's a good point. So if the nucleus accumbens is the pleasure center, what other parts of the brain are involved in motivation?
The prefrontal cortex, that CEO we talked about earlier, is super important.
Right. The prefrontal cortex, it's in charge of planning, decision-making, goal-oriented behavior. How does that relate to motivation, though?
The prefrontal cortex helps us figure out potential rewards.
Okay.
Make choices that are in line with our goals and values, and resist those impulses that could lead us off track.
So it's like the voice of reason.
I like that. It helps us go for long-term satisfaction, not just short-term pleasure.
So it's like a constant tug-of-war between the nucleus accumbens wanting that immediate reward and the prefrontal cortex trying to keep us focused on the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Right.
And finding that balance is essential for healthy motivation and making good decisions.
Right. But I'm wondering, is all motivation just based on these, like, basic reward mechanisms?
Not necessarily. Some motivations are way more complex, more
Okay.
nuanced.
Okay.
They involve social and emotional factors.
Give me an example.
Take social motivation.
Okay.
It's that drive to connect with others, to form relationships, to belong.
Yeah, the need to belong.
Uh-huh.
I think we all feel that. What's happening in the brain when we feel that urge to connect?
Social motivation involves a whole bunch of brain regions and neurotransmitter systems, including some we've talked about already,
Okay.
like the nucleus accumbens and the prefrontal cortex.
Right.
But there are others too.
Okay.
The amygdala, which helps us process social and emotional cues,
Okay.
and the fusiform face area, that one's specialized for recognizing faces.
So it's like we're literally wired for connection.
Exactly. Social interaction is essential for us, for our well-being, even our survival. And our brains have developed specific mechanisms to make these social behaviors happen.
Fascinating. It really shows how social we are as human beings. Okay, but what about emotions in all this? Where do they fit in with the brain?
Emotions, they're intertwined with everything we've been talking about.
Okay.
Intelligence, consciousness,
Right.
learning,
Right.
memory,
Yeah.
motivation.
Yeah.
They color our experiences, shape our decisions, influence how we interact with the world.
So emotions aren't just these fleeting feelings, right? They're
Yeah.
like deeply ingrained in how our brains work.
They are. Emotions are these complex psychological states.
Okay.
They involve physiological changes, how
Yeah.
we think about things and how we express ourselves.
Right.
And they're not random. They're processed and regulated by certain brain circuits.
So are there specific parts of the brain that deal with emotions?
Definitely. One of the main players is the amygdala.
Okay. Yeah, we've talked about that.
Right. And it's really involved in fear and other negative emotions. Helps us spot threats and react quickly to danger.
So it's like our internal alarm system triggering that fight or flight response when we sense danger.
Exactly. And that's crucial for survival.
Right.
But it's not just fear.
Okay.
The amygdala is also involved in positive emotions, helping us learn from rewarding experiences and form those social bonds.
So it's more than just a fear center. It's a more like complex emotional processing center. What other brain regions are involved?
Another key one is the insula.
Okay.
It processes a bunch of emotions,
Okay.
especially those linked to how our bodies feel.
Like,
Disgust, pain, pleasure.
so the insula helps us connect our emotions to our physical sensations.
Yes. It's like the bridge between our mind and body.
Okay.
It's how we feel those gut reactions connected to our emotions.
Okay, that makes sense. When I feel embarrassed, I get that feeling of warmth in my cheeks.
Right.
That's the insula then.
Could be. It's letting us experience those physical parts of our emotions. And then there's the prefrontal cortex, specifically the ventromedial prefrontal cortex.
We've talked about the prefrontal cortex, that CEO of the brain.
Oh.
But how does it handle emotions?
The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, it's key for regulating emotions.
Okay.
Helps us control impulses,
Mm-hmm.
make rational choices,
Right.
and deal with those complex social situations.
So it's like the emotional control center.
Think of it that way. It reins in those impulsive reactions and helps us respond in a more measured way.
That's so important for getting along with others. Imagine if everyone just acted on every emotional impulse they had.
Chaos.
Yeah.
But the prefrontal cortex, it lets us manage our emotions, make thoughtful decisions, build meaningful relationships.
Okay. This is fascinating. I'm starting to see how all these different parts, the amygdala, the insula, the prefrontal cortex, are working together to create our emotional experiences. But are there like different brain patterns for different emotions?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Research suggests yes. Different emotions have distinct brain activity patterns.
So it's not just about feeling happy or sad.
Right.
There are real measurable changes in the brain.
Exactly. And these patterns can change based on individual differences,
Right.
cultural background, even personal experiences.
Okay, that makes sense. Our emotional responses are a mix of nature and nurture. What about empathy, though?
Empathy.
Yeah, that seems like a super important emotion for connecting with others and understanding them.
It is. Empathy lets us understand and share the feelings of others.
Okay.
It's how we connect on a deeper level, feel their pain, their joy like it's our own.
So how does empathy work in the brain?
It's this complex dance between different regions.
Okay.
A key player is the anterior insular cortex.
Okay.
Remember, that's involved in our own bodily sensations and emotions.
Right, right. So the same area that helps us feel our own physical sensations is also involved in understanding what others are feeling.
Okay.
We think the anterior insular cortex helps us understand other people's emotions by simulating those feelings in our own bodies.
This is like we're putting ourselves in their shoes, feeling what they feel.
You got it.
Wow.
It's like our brains are built for empathy, allowing us to share in those emotional experiences.
Okay.
And that's crucial for relationships, cooperation, and a more compassionate world.
It's really amazing to think about how connected we are, not just socially, but on a neural level, too. Okay, so this brings us to a topic that's often seen as the holy grail of neuroscience.
Consciousness.
Consciousness. It's the big one. What makes us who we are, sets us apart, lets us experience the world. But how does it arise from all these neurons?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't have all the answers yet, but neuroscience is giving us some clues.
Like what?
One theory is that consciousness is this emergent property of complex brain activity.
Emergent property. What does that mean exactly?
It means consciousness isn't located in any one spot.
Okay. It arises from all these billions of neurons working together. Kind of like how a flock of birds creates those amazing patterns in the sky,
Right.
even though no single bird is leading the whole thing.
Okay, so it's not about finding the consciousness center in the brain, but about understanding how the whole system works together to create that awareness.
Exactly. Another theory is global workspace theory.
Global workspace theory, okay.
It proposes that consciousness happens when info is broadcast all over the brain, making it available for different cognitive processes to use.
So instead of information being processed in isolation, it's shared across different parts of the brain, creating this more unified, coherent experience.
You got it. And then there's integrated information theory.
Integrated information theory. Okay, this is getting a bit much.
Yeah, it's a bit dense.
Okay.
But essentially, it suggests that consciousness is a measure of how much integrated information is in a system.
So the more interconnected the system, the more conscious it is.
Think of it like the difference between a light switch and a computer network.
A light switch is just on or off.
Right.
But computer network processes information from multiple places,
Yeah.
creating a more complex output.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this theory suggests that the human brain, with all its connections, can process way more integrated information than anything else, which might explain why we experience consciousness the way we do.
Wow. This is fascinating, but it sounds like we're just beginning to understand consciousness.
We really are.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest mysteries in science, and we'll need a lot more research to really figure it out.
Yeah.
But these theories, they give us ways to think about how consciousness could come from the physical stuff of the brain.
It's really mind-blowing.
It is.
It makes you realize how much we still don't know about the human brain.
It does. So where do we go from here? What other aspects of the brain can we explore?
Well, let's dive into altered states of consciousness.
Ooh, yes.
You know, those times when our normal awareness kind of gets disrupted. Right. And we experience shifts in perception, thoughts, behavior.
Altered states of consciousness, they're like these windows into how the mind works.
Okay.
They show us just how flexible our brains are and how our perception of reality can change so drastically depending on, well, a bunch of things.
So we're talking about experiences where our normal waking consciousness kind of takes a back seat, right?
Exactly. And these states can be triggered by all sorts of things.
Right.
Natural processes, like sleeping, dreaming,
Okay.
practices like meditation or hypnosis, even certain substances.
Okay, let's start with sleep.
Okay.
It's something we all do,
Right.
but we don't really think about it much. What's actually going on in the brain when we're asleep?
Well, sleep isn't just lying there doing nothing.
Right.
It's an active process with
Right.
these distinct stages.
Okay.
Each stage has its own unique brainwave pattern,
Okay.
its own physiological changes.
Oh.
During non-REM sleep, things slow down. Brain activity decreases, muscles relax, heart rate and breathing become more regular.
So non-REM sleep is all about rest and repair.
Exactly. Recharging. But then we go into REM sleep.
Okay.
That's where it gets interesting.
REM sleep, that's when we dream, right? What's happening in our brains then?
Brain activity actually increases during REM sleep,
Right.
almost to the same level as when we're awake.
Wow.
Our eyes move back and forth,
Yeah.
even though they're closed.
Right.
Most of our dreaming happens here,
Okay.
and those dreams, they can be
Oh.
super vivid, very emotional.
It's like our brains are putting on a movie for us while we sleep. But why do we dream? What's the purpose?
Another great question, and one that's kept scientists guessing for a long time.
Right.
We don't know for sure,
Okay.
but there are some interesting theories.
Okay, like what?
One is that dreams help with memory consolidation.
Okay.
They process and integrate the stuff we took in during the day.
So while we sleep, our brains are sorting through our experiences, figuring out what to keep, what to toss.
Yeah, like cleaning up the hard drive.
Okay.
Another theory suggests that dreams are about emotions.
Okay.
They help us process difficult or challenging emotions, in a safe space.
So like working through those emotional knots while we sleep.
Exactly.
Okay.
Maybe that's why we wake up feeling more refreshed and balanced. And there's even a theory that dreams might be linked to creativity,
Okay.
problem solving,
Brilliant.
letting our brains make new connections, explore different solutions.
So all those weird nonsensical dreams, maybe those are actually our brains working through creative blocks and sparking new ideas.
It's possible. Dreams give us a peek into how our minds work beneath the surface.
Okay, that's fascinating. Let's move on to another way people try to change their consciousness. Meditation.
Meditation.
I've heard it's beneficial, but I've never actually tried it.
Wow.
What is it exactly? And how does it affect the brain?
Meditation is about focusing your attention on one thing.
Okay. Could be your breath, a
Yeah.
mantra,
Yeah.
a visual image, whatever.
Okay.
The goal is to quiet all that mental chatter,
Hmm.
find some inner peace,
Okay.
and become more self-aware.
It sounds pretty challenging to quiet that constant stream of thoughts.
It can be, but with practice, it gets easier to find that focus,
Right.
that calm state of mind.
Hmm.
And research shows that meditation can be really good for our mental and physical health.
Like what kind of benefits are we talking about?
Well, studies show it can reduce stress, improve focus,
Okay.
boost emotional regulation,
Right.
even strengthen your immune system.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. What happens in the brain when we meditate?
Brain imaging studies,
Yeah.
they've shown some interesting changes in brain activity during meditation,
Okay, like what?
especially in areas linked to attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness.
Okay.
For example, meditation can increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, right? The one involved in executive function and emotional control. So meditation is giving our prefrontal cortex a workout, strengthening those abilities.
Exactly. It can also decrease activity in the amygdala.
Which is the part that processes fear and other negative emotions.
That's right. So maybe meditation helps to lower that stress response, making us less reactive to tough situations.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I can see how a calmer, more focused mind could really improve our lives.
Absolutely.
Better relationships, better work performance,
Yeah.
just better overall well-being.
Exactly. And meditation is just one example of something we can do to change our state of consciousness.
Right.
Hypnosis is another one.
Okay, hypnosis.
Yeah.
That always seemed a bit mysterious to me.
Mm.
What is it exactly? And how does it actually work?
Hypnosis is this state where you become more open to suggestions
Okay.
from the hypnotist, of course.
Right.
It's often described as this trance-like state.
Okay.
You have focused attention,
Mm.
less awareness of what's around you, and you're more responsive to those suggestions.
So it's like the hypnotist is going around your conscious mind and getting to that more receptive subconscious level?
Yeah, something like that. The exact mechanisms of hypnosis are still up for debate,
Okay.
but it seems to involve changes in brain activity,
Okay.
especially in areas related to attention, imagination, executive control.
So what are some of the ways hypnosis is used?
It's been used for a bunch of things. Pain management, helping people quit smoking,
Mm.
treating phobias,
Mm.
even improving performance in things like sports or public speaking.
It sounds like hypnosis can be a powerful tool for, like, changing behavior, but are there risks?
Well, hypnosis is generally considered safe when it's done by a qualified professional,
Okay.
but it's not a magic bullet,
Right.
and it doesn't work for everyone.
Right.
You really want to find a hypnotist who is experienced and has a good reputation.
That's good advice. It's important to be careful with anything that changes our consciousness. And it's always a good idea to seek guidance from a professional.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about another way altered states of consciousness can happen. Drugs.
Drugs.
Yeah.
Right. Drugs can definitely have a big impact on consciousness, changing how we see things, think, feel, and act.
Okay.
They do this by messing with the brain's balance of neurotransmitters.
So they're basically hijacking the brain's communication system.
Exactly. Different drugs affect different neurotransmitters, leading to different effects.
Okay, so like stimulants,
Right.
like caffeine or cocaine, they increase activity.
Yeah,
Okay.
leading to feelings of alertness, energy, euphoria.
What about depressants?
Okay.
Alcohol is a depressant, right? How does it work?
Depressants slow down brain activity,
Okay.
which leads to feelings of relaxation, drowsiness, and, lowered inhibitions.
Right. But too much alcohol can really impair judgment, mess with coordination.
Oh, yeah.
People can even black out.
It's all about moderation.
Definitely. What about hallucinogens?
Hallucinogens. Yeah. Those are interesting.
Yeah.
Things like LSD, psilocybin, that's what's in magic mushrooms. They distort perception.
Right.
They cause hallucinations,
Okay.
change your consciousness.
Okay.
People might see, hear, feel things that aren't real.
Wow.
Their sense of time and self can be messed up too.
So it's like they're entering a totally different reality.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
And these experiences, they can be really profound, even life-changing for some people.
Okay.
But for others, they
Mhm.
can be scary, disorienting. It depends on the person, the setting, the dose.
Right. It sounds like there's a big range in how people react to hallucinogens. Are there any medical uses for them?
There's actually growing research into that.
Oh, wow.
Looking at how they could help with depression,
Yeah.
anxiety, addiction. But it's early days,
Right.
and these drugs are still illegal in most places.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Better to err on the side of caution and follow the science.
absolutely.
Okay, there's another type of drug I think we should talk about.
Okay, what's that? Opioids.
Opioids.
Yeah, we're in the middle of an opioid crisis right now.
Yeah.
And I'd like to understand how these drugs work in the brain and why they're so addictive.
Okay, so opioids, these include things like heroin, morphine,
Oh,
fentanyl. They're really strong painkillers.
okay.
They work by attaching to opioid receptors in the brain.
Okay.
This reduces pain signals, creates feelings of euphoria and relaxation.
So they're hijacking the brain's natural pain relief system.
Exactly. And they can be very helpful for managing really bad pain,
Okay.
but they have a high risk of addiction.
So why are opioids so addictive? What makes them different from other drugs?
Well, opioids, they don't just reduce pain.
Okay.
They also trigger that release of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens.
Right, the pleasure center.
Exactly.
Okay.
This dopamine rush,
Yeah.
it creates that strong sense of reward, making it hard to stop using.
It's a really difficult situation. People are just trying to feel better, escape pain or emotional distress. Right.
But they get caught in this cycle of addiction.
Yeah.
And it can have devastating effects on their lives, their families.
It's a complex problem, and there are no easy answers.
Right.
But understanding how these drugs work, that's a vital step.
Yeah,
It can help us develop better ways to prevent and treat addiction.
definitely. And I think it's important to emphasize that there's help available.
Absolutely.
Recovery is possible.
Absolutely. There are effective treatments,
Yeah.
medications,
Yeah.
therapies.
Yeah.
People can recover.
Okay, let's move to a final topic related to consciousness,
That's all.
the self. What is it, and how does it arise from the brain?
The self, it's our sense of identity.
Okay.
It's that subjective experience of being a unique and continuous individual. It's what lets us recognize ourselves in a mirror,
Right.
to feel like our thoughts and actions are our own,
Right.
to know we're separate from others.
It's like our internal guide, giving us a sense of continuity in our experiences.
That's a good way to put it. And the self, it's not static.
Right.
It's constantly changing, molded by our experiences, relationships, how we interact with the world.
So it's not like we're born with this fully formed sense of self.
Right.
It develops over time.
Exactly. And like everything else we've talked about, the self is deeply connected to the brain.
So there are specific circuits in the brain dedicated to processing information about the self.
Yes. One of the main ones is the medial prefrontal cortex.
Okay, yeah, we've mentioned that before.
Right.
What does it do in this context?
It's active when we think about ourselves,
Oh,
our traits, experiences, relationships.
so the medial prefrontal cortex is like the brain's me center, the hub of self-awareness.
I like that.
Okay.
Another important one is the posterior cingulate cortex.
Okay.
It's involved in self-referential processing, like remembering personal stuff and recognizing your own face.
So it helps us figure out what info is about ourselves as opposed to other people.
Right. And the temporoparietal junction helps us know we are separate from others, that we have our own unique perspective.
It's like it draws the line between self and other.
Exactly. All these regions work together to create our sense of self, combining information from our body, memories, and social interactions.
It's incredible. It's like the self is this tapestry woven from our experiences, relationships, and neural activity.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Okay.
And this tapestry keeps changing throughout life as we have new experiences, build new connections, and learn new things.
But what about self-awareness? That
Okay.
seems like a crucial part of all this. What is it and how does it work?
Self-awareness is that ability to reflect on ourselves, to be conscious of our thoughts, feelings, actions.
Okay.
It's what lets us monitor ourselves,
Right.
evaluate how we're doing, and make changes if we need to.
So it's like having an internal observer constantly watching and evaluating us.
Exactly. Self-awareness is so important for emotional intelligence, social skills, personal growth. It helps us understand our strengths, our weaknesses, learn from mistakes, make those positive changes.
But I imagine it's not always easy.
No.
Facing our flaws, our shortcomings,
Right.
that can be tough.
It can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd rather just avoid it.
Right.
But developing self-awareness, it's so important
Right.
for growing as a person and for our well-being.
Hmm.
It lets us be more authentic, have stronger relationships, make better choices.
That makes sense. If we don't know our own patterns, our tendencies, we're probably going to keep making the same mistakes.
Exactly.
Wow.
And like other parts of the
Yeah.
self-awareness involves those key brain regions.
Okay.
The medial prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, the insula.
Those are all areas we've talked about before. It seems like the brain is incredibly interconnected.
It is.
Different parts working together in all these different combinations to produce all these experiences and behaviors.
It's not just a bunch of separate pieces. It's this integrated dynamic system.
Yeah.
And that's what allows us to experience the world in all its complexity.
It's fascinating. It's like the brain is this incredible orchestra.
Yeah.
Different sections playing different melodies,
I like that.
but all working together to create this amazing symphony.
That's beautiful. And just like an orchestra needs a conductor,
Right.
the brain needs something to integrate all this information,
Okay.
to create that unified sense of self and experience.
So are you saying there's something in the brain that acts as the conductor, bringing everything together?
That's a question that's still a mystery.
Hmm.
And it brings us to another big topic,
What's that?
free will.
Free will. Philosophers have been debating that one for
I
centuries.
know, right?
What can neuroscience tell us about whether we really have free will?
Well, it's complicated, but neuroscience is giving us some insight. Some neuroscientists say free will is an illusion, that our choices are already determined by our genes and our environment. They point to studies showing brain activity happening before we're even consciously aware of making a decision.
So you're saying our brains are making decisions before we even know it?
That's what some research suggests. But other neuroscientists say no, free will is real.
Okay.
Our brains aren't just robots following a program.
Right.
We can consciously override our impulses, make choices that go against our habits,
Right.
change our behavior based on what we value and what our goals are.
So it's not a simple yes or no answer. There's evidence on both sides.
Exactly. The jury's still out on free will.
Okay.
Neuroscience is giving us the tools to study how decisions happen in the brain and what factors influence them.
This is something we could talk about for hours.
hmm
But let's shift gears to another factor that shapes us. Culture. How does that influence the brain?
Culture.
Yeah.
Culture is a huge force in who we are,
Okay.
how we think, how we behave.
Right.
It's all those shared beliefs,
Mhm.
values, practices, and even the things we create as a group of people.
Okay.
It's passed down through generations, through language,
Yeah.
social learning, and shared experiences.
So it's not just about our genes. Our environment and our culture play a big part in shaping our brains and our behavior.
Exactly. Our brains are incredibly adaptable,
Mhm.
shaped by the cultures we live in.
Okay.
For instance, language is a big one.
Language, right? It's how
Yeah.
we communicate, how we learn, how we understand the world.
Hmm.
But how does language actually affect the brain?
The way language is structured can actually shape how we think about the world.
Really?
Languages that have different words for, say, shades of color,
Okay.
that can impact people's ability to tell those colors apart.
Interesting.
And different grammatical structures can influence how we think about time, space, even cause and effect.
So the language we speak can literally change how our brains process information.
It can. It's a cool example of how culture can mold the brain. Another one is social norms.
Social norms, those are the unwritten rules of how we should act around others.
That's it.
Okay.
And they can be super different across cultures.
Right, like some cultures are more individualistic while others focus more on the group.
Exactly. These cultural values shape how we process social info and how we're motivated to act socially.
So people from those individualistic cultures might be more tuned into individual differences, personal success, while those from more collectivist cultures might be more about group harmony.
You got it. And these differences show up in brain activity, too.
Oh, really?
Studies have found that people from different cultures, their brains activate differently when they're figuring out social cues and making judgments.
Wow, so culture can actually change how our brains respond to social information.
It can. It really shows that the brain isn't just shaped by our genes.
Right.
It's also shaped by our experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And those experiences are tied to our culture.
This is fascinating. What about morality? Where does our sense of right and wrong come from?
Morality.
That's another complex part of being human.
Okay.
It's deeply connected to the brain.
Okay.
Our moral beliefs and values,
Yeah.
they shape our choices, guide our actions, affect how we treat others.
Okay.
And like other behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
morality is influenced by biological, psychological, and cultural factors.
So are there specific parts of the brain involved in making moral decisions?
There are. One is the ventromedial prefrontal cortex.
That one again.
We've talked about it before.
We have.
It's involved with emotions, value judgments, understanding how others feel.
Right. So the same part that helps us make choices based on our own emotions also helps us think about how our actions affect others emotionally.
Exactly. It's like it helps us weigh the consequences of our choices, not just for ourselves, but for everyone involved. Another key area is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
That one's important for planning, working memory, cognitive control.
So it's helping us control impulses and make more thought-out moral decisions. Exactly. It's like our voice of reason,
Okay.
helping us think about long-term consequences, making sure our actions match our morals.
Right, because doing the right thing often means not giving in to those immediate urges and thinking about the bigger picture.
You got it. And while these brain areas are the machinery, so to speak, for moral choices, our moral compass also comes from our upbringing,
Cool.
our culture, our experiences.
So again, it's both nature and nurture.
Exactly.
Okay.
Morality is this complex blend, and it keeps evolving as we face new situations and figure out what's right and wrong.
This is also interesting. It really shows how our brains, our experiences, and our social worlds are all linked. What about altruism?
Altruism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does selfless acts fit into all this?
Altruism has been a puzzle for a long time.
Yeah.
How can you explain it when, natural selection favors those who put themselves first?
It doesn't seem to make sense. Why would we help others if it costs us something?
There are a few theories out there.
Okay.
One is kin selection. It says we're more likely to help family because it increases the chances that our genes get passed on,
Okay.
even if we have to make sacrifices.
So our genes are actually driving us to be altruistic as a way to ensure their survival.
It's possible. Then there's reciprocal altruism.
Okay.
That's when we help someone hoping they'll help us back.
Okay.
It creates a system where everyone wins, both individuals and groups.
It's like an unwritten agreement. I help you, you help me, everyone benefits.
Exactly. And then there's group selection.
Okay.
Groups that work together, that help each other, they're more likely to do well than groups that are all about competition and selfishness.
So altruism could have evolved as a way for groups to stay strong and survive.
That's the idea. All these theories suggest that altruism isn't just some random act of kindness.
Okay.
It's a complex behavior,
Yeah.
likely developed over time to benefit individuals and the whole group.
That makes a lot of sense.
Our
Are there parts of the brain specifically involved in being altruistic?
research has found that it's linked to activity in several areas, including the anterior cingulate cortex, involved in empathy and decision-making,
Okay.
and the temporoparietal junction,
Right.
which is involved in taking someone else's perspective.
So when we're deciding whether to help someone, these areas are helping us weigh the pros and cons, put ourselves in their shoes, and make a choice that fits with our values.
That's the idea. Altruism is this mix of emotional, cognitive, and social stuff. And it really shows the human capacity for compassion.
Wow, this has been an amazing journey.
It has.
We've gone from the basic building blocks of neurons to consciousness, the self, even morality. What are your final thoughts?
I'm just constantly in awe of the human brain. I mean, it's amazing how evolution has created this organ capable of learning,
Right.
adapting, being so resilient. We've learned so much, but there's still so much more to discover.
It's like we've only just started to read this incredible story.
Right.
There's so many more chapters waiting to be explored.
Right. And I'm really excited to see what the future holds for neuroscience.
Me too.
New technology, better computational models,
Yeah.
advances in genetics. We're on the verge of even bigger discoveries.
It's a really thrilling time to be exploring the human brain.
It is.
I'm definitely feeling a sense of wonder about all its possibilities. And I'm even more curious now, wanting to learn more about this amazing organ.
Keep that curiosity going. Never stop exploring the wonders of the brain.
Well, there you have it, everyone. We've explored intelligence, consciousness, and the amazing human brain. We've seen how our brains learn, adapt, and create our experiences. And while we still have a lot to learn, the research in neuroscience keeps revealing new things about this incredible organ. Keep those brain cells firing, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.